is Jewish Spotlight, a weekly television program presented by Chabad Lubavitch of Long Island, featuring various aspects of modern Jewish life and Jewish culture. Now, here is your host, Rabbi Tuvia Teldin.
Shalom, welcome to the Jewish Spotlight. Tonight we're going to talk about something that happens in life that's happened to everybody, but nobody really understands why it happens and for what reason it could possibly happen to us at the time it's happening to us. Why is it something Jewish? We're going to find out about that, but we're going to talk about coincidences. Coincidences that happen to you in life are not coincidences. They're really something more to it. And you know what? Think about it, and we'll talk about it later on in the show. Think about it as something that's coming right from God. But in the meantime, I want to introduce you to our guest this week, who's Mrs. Judith Leventhal, who is the author, the co-author of Small Miracles, and who's here with us today. Mrs. Leventhal, it's a pleasure to have you with us today.
Thank you for having me on your show.
Well, we're looking forward to hearing all about your experiences. First of all, Small Miracles, of course, has been a very, very successful, well-read book, and it hits some place in the heart. I read one of your books that really hit me in a very special place as far as having an appreciation of the small miracles of life. Now, can you tell us a little bit about the idea behind the book, why you got involved, and what you hope to accomplish with the writing of this book?
That's a big question
well,
right
well,
there.
We can
Lots
take
of
one
different
at a time.
questions in one. Okay. Basically, Yitta Halberstam, my co-author, Yitta Halberstam and I, have had so many coincidences that have happened to us in our own life. And we were just sitting over lunch one day, and by the way, we met through coincidences, a series of coincidences. And we're sitting over lunch, and I said, Yitta, I've had so many coincidences that have happened to me, and I just know they're not just coincidences. Something magical is happening here, something miraculous. And she said, I can't believe you're saying that because I feel the same way about the coincidences that have happened to me. I said, what do you say we write a book about it? Coincidences that have happened to people in their life. And Yitta had been writing for many, many years. She had lots of contacts in the publishing world. And so we made a book proposal, and here we are 3 books later, 1 million books in print, over 1 million in print.
That's great.
And basically the concept of the book is just what I said, that there are no such things as just coincidences. This is not just happenstance. Like you said in the introduction, something else is going on.
So what do you think is going on?
These are taps on the shoulders from God. I'm sure every single viewer here has had some experience where either you're sitting at home or you're walking down the street and you think of someone that you haven't thought of in the longest time, and all of a sudden the phone rings, or you look across the street and there's that person that you were just thinking of that you haven't thought of in the longest time. And you said, I can't believe you're here. I was just thinking of you. What is that? Is that just a coincidence? We don't think so. That's like a tap on the shoulder from up above, as if to say, hello, I'm with you, you're not alone. Then, of course, there are some incredible shouts from up above, those amazing coincidences that defy the rational. And I'd love to share one of those with you. Basically, the book is comprised of 50 of these amazing stories. Each book, Small Miracles, Small Miracles 2, and now the 3rd book, Small Miracles of Love and Friendship, has 50 to 60 of these amazing stories. I'll share one.
Okay.
This couple is set up on a blind date with each other, and they're sharing information as couples do on a blind date, and the woman says to the man, where were you during World War II? And he says, I had a horrific experience, and he goes on to describe the horror that he had seen firsthand in the concentration camps. And as he's talking, a slight smile crosses his face. He says, I want to tell you one bittersweet memory that I recall. She says, I want to hear that. He says, one day I was looking over the barbed wire fence, and my eyes caught sight of a beautiful girl on the other side of the fence. And somehow she managed to pass me an apple. I looked at this apple in my hand. It was like a ray of sunshine had entered into my dark universe. And the next day I saw that same beautiful girl, and this went on for several days. And one day I looked at her, and I felt just so broken inside it as I said these words to her. I said, tomorrow you won't be able to pass me an apple. They're sending me on to yet another concentration camp. And with that, he said, I turned away and I cried because I knew I'll never see her again. Well, this woman sitting on the blind date looks at this man and says, "Look at my face.
Really?
Don't you recognize me?
You're kidding.
I was that girl on the other side of the fence." The man can't hardly believe his eyes, and he says, "I left you then. I never want to leave you again. Please be my wife. Marry me." And she says, "Of course I will."
That was on the first date.
On the first date. And the two of them got married, and they
Right.
celebrated their anniversary on the Oprah Winfrey Show.
You're kidding. That
And
was
Oprah
beautiful.
Winfrey looks at this elderly gentleman and says, "What do you want to say to your wife on this anniversary day?" And he looks at her with tear-filled eyes and he says, "You fed me in concentration camp. You fed me for all these years. And now I'm hungry always for your love."
That's beautiful.
That's not a coincidence. These are the shouts. These are the shouts from heaven.
Hmm. Tell me, in your personal life, you're a religious woman?
I'm Orthodox Jew.
You're an Orthodox Jewish?
Yes.
All right, so these concepts of what we call bashert or shgacha
Bashert.
pratis, it was meant to be, or divine providence, these are part of our upbringing in terms of being able to know that when things happen in the world, God is guiding us in many ways. Sometimes we don't see it clearly, sometimes we do see it clearly. What I think you've done so well is to really shout out to a person, as you say, that it's so clear that there are so many things going on in our life which are under the direction of God. And that's a beautiful part, because you just hit one story after another with these types of situations.
Yes, and I think that the more you get into the stories, the more you read them, the more your soul is touched. And the more your soul is touched, the spirit is touched, the more you come alive. There's a wonderful story in the introduction that says, this speaks about this man who's walking down the street, and he radiates light. He's just glowing. And people stop him and ask him, are you an angel? He says, "No, I'm not an angel." "Are you a prophet?" they ask. He says, "No, I'm not a prophet." "But you're shining, you're glowing. Are you God?" He says, "I'm not God. I'm simply awake." The more awake we are, the more we open our eyes to the world around us, the more we get to see God's hand in our life in every moment.
So what you're saying then, which is something I'd like to touch upon, is that the coincidences are only perhaps the windows that help us to see something very clearly. But as far...
If we look in the window.
Right.
Right. So many of us look at these coincidences and say, "Oh, happenstance. This is just coincidence. This is meaningless. Just a random act. It's fun." But we then lose out on the opportunity to open that window.
So let's go into that. Let's say
Yeah.
for a person who does believe in God, you're suggesting that they should look at a coincidence as a tap on the shoulder. For a person who doesn't believe in God or is agnostic, is questioning whether or not God exists, should a coincidence be a way of them being able to say, "Hey, listen, maybe there's something more to this than meets the surface"? Or have you ever had this discussion with people
Yes, that's exactly it.
Okay,
That's
go
like
on.
that could be the turning point. That could be the door, or like the window, you say, of opportunity. It's always there.
Right.
It's always there. There's always the opportunity to see the hand of God in our life. Do we take that opportunity or do we not?
Right.
Another story, may I share?
Please.
So this talking about just taking opportunity, and it's there everywhere if we just open our eyes. So it's just one of the many that come to my mind is this limousine is pulled over on the side of a road, and obviously the chauffeur can't get the limousine to go. It's broken down, and one of the many hundreds of cars driving by, one of them decides to stop. He stops over. He was actually a religious Jew. Stops over and says to the chauffeur, "Can I help you?" And the chauffeur says, "I want to thank you so much. I'm here for such a long time. No one has stopped. Please, would you please go and call my boss for me? Because I need some help." And the man says, "Of course I'll do that. What's the big deal?" And he goes to the nearest gas station, makes a call, comes back to the chauffeur and said, "I called the boss. Help is on the way." And the chauffeur looks at this man and says, "I want to thank you so much. Please, can I have your address, your phone number, something to send you a token of appreciation?" He says, "Oh, please, don't even bother. What was it for me? It was a 2-minute phone call. Please, let it go." Chauffeur says, "I insist. Please give me some information." And the man says, "You know what? I'll tell you what. Here's my address. My wife's birthday is on Friday. Send her a gift. Dozen roses. That's all I ask you. Thank you." And he drives off. Well, that Friday, a dozen roses arrives in the mail, along with a note that says, "Dear Mr. So-and-so, we wish your wife a happy birthday, and the mortgage on your house has been paid off."
Oh, come on.
Signed, this millionaire who every single viewer knows is familiar with that name, but they've asked us to maintain his anonymity.
That's a true story?
That's an absolute true story.
Have you gone into these stories to verify that they're true?
100%.
Really?
100%. I wish I could share his name, and I've asked several times. I've called, and they really requested that we maintain his anonymity. I have all the other information, but
well, that's really
talk
that's an act of kindness. That's
but
of course way
but these are
beyond
the
call of duty.
opportunities. These are the opportunities.
Right, exactly.
When we help another person, aren't we spreading a certain godliness?
Definitely.
Aren't we sharing in what we're here what our task is, what our mission on life is all about?
But I think to a great degree also, people have a hard time accepting that. Wait a second, if you're going to say to me that everything is under God's control and that there's so many things that God is guiding us with, and not just the coincidences of our life, but also, let's say, sometimes the difficult parts of our life. So, of course, the question comes, which I as a rabbi get very often, is how could this be coming from God? And why should God do this to me? And why me? And why now? And so forth and so on. And I try to explain to people, and again, this is based on Hashgacha Pratis, divine providence, which is such an important part of the Jewish way of life, because that's how we develop a personal relationship with God. When we look at God as being one God, but way up there, one God as opposed to 2, 3, or 4 gods, that's one way of thinking it. Another way of thinking of one God is that this is one God who's very much involved with a life and there on a constant basis, and somebody we can personally relate to as you relate to a father or a mother, or relate to a good friend or a loved one. And then sometimes in relationships, there are the good times and there are the bad times. There are the times that hard things are dealt out, and hard times that there is great rewards that come with it. So of course, part of the challenge is seeing, as you say, seeing every event of our lives as having that window of opportunity to be able to see God's action in that event itself. And it's a challenge, but it's a beautiful challenge. Of course, what your book does is to help people take the first step in facing that challenge and see that, appreciating those things that happen is such a meaningful thing, to take even the small events of life and see them as a gift from God, and it just changes a person's perspective on life completely. When you deal individually with people, let's say people who have reacted to your book, not the people who have written the stories, but people who have reacted to your book, what kind of reactions have you gotten? Have you gotten any people who have really started this process of opening their eyes with a different perspective on life as a result of your book?
Yes. We didn't think, when we first sat over coffee, Yitta and I, and decided to write this book, we thought it'll touch people, it'll be interesting. But we had no sense that it'll touch such a deep chord in people, that it'll open people in such a deep way. I can't tell you how many times I've done book signings at bookstores, or I've gone to different talks, and people have come over and said, your book is such an antidote to the stresses of today. I keep your book at my nightstand and read one story before I go to sleep. Because in today's day and age, when we are so inundated with email and faxes and cellulars and beepers and computer and internet and on and on and on, it's so nice to have a reprieve from all that and touch the spirit, touch the soul, touch the God in us. And that's what these stories speak of. And
how has it affected you personally?
How has it affected
in terms of not
me?
just your life and because of your newfound fame, so to say, but your own personal feelings about God, about your relationship with a human being, the way you look at life? Has that been affected by writing this book and by reflecting upon very deeply? In what way?
Very deeply.
How?
It's affected me very deeply because I have, been brought up as an Orthodox Jew. I went to private schools, Beis Yaakov, Beth Jacob Academy,
Right.
And I view God in definitely a very personal way. But learning about these stories, and you have to understand, for every 50 stories we put in the book, we read 1,050. So being in that close touch with that many people that have had so clearly the hand of God touch their life has made me even more in awe of the spirit that is involved in our life, has made me more humble to that, and in just general made me more humble to see that we are not human beings having a spiritual experience. It's clear to me now that we are spiritual beings having a human experience.
That's very beautiful. I've heard that before, and it's a very powerful statement. Can you go into it a little bit more? What does that mean to you?
If we allow ourselves to think that we're human beings having a spiritual experience, we could go through our days and go through our nights kind of focusing on just what we view as reality, whether it means making money, getting through the day, food, shopping, just the mundane of living.
Right.
That's if we view ourselves as human beings having a spiritual experience. Yes, we'll go to synagogue, we'll go to church, we'll do whatever, touch the spirit, but it's just touching. But if we change our prism of how we view ourselves in our life, then we see that our essence is that we are spiritual beings. That this is just a corridor. Our life is we're just walking through this world. We are actually spiritual beings. We happen to be in human form right now. There's a wonderful story that actually my husband told me when we were dating. I asked him, what makes you so not materialistic? And he said to me a wonderful story that we live by this till today. We refer to this many times. There was a great rabbi by the name of the Chafetz Chaim. And the Chafetz Chaim had a visitor come to his home. Mm-hmm. And the visitor looked around this rabbi's home and saw there was hardly any furniture. So he looked at the Chafetz Chaim and he said, I don't understand. Why is this house so sparse? Where's all the furniture? And the Chafetz Chaim looked at this man who was a traveler and said, I don't understand. Look at you. You only have a suitcase on you. Why do you only have a suitcase with you? Where's everything else? And the man said, well, I'm only passing through. And the Chafetz Chaim, this great wise rabbi, said, well, my friend, so am I.
But that's
what it means.
Yes, but that can be misunderstood also.
Experience.
All right, but you could take that story as meaning that life here is not important, or
No. We are spiritual beings, so let's just focus on the mundane.
Right, the question is, what is the priority?
Which is exactly. What's the priority?
Right.
Do we want to focus on filling our lives and our homes with worldly possessions? And is that where we're going to put all our energy? Or are we going to put our energy on filling our souls? Mm-hmm. And if we do that, then we are in line with spiritual beings.
Right. As a footnote to that, in terms of experiencing those things that happen to us on that level. In other words, something happens to me that's quote-unquote bad. I can experience it and feel like a victim, which of course is a very natural reaction. Or I can say, wait a second, maybe there's some reason why this is happening to me. In other words, it's not necessarily a coincidence that I can say it's so clear why this is happening to me, but I have to kind of look beneath the surface to see that maybe there's some other reason. It might take me 5 minutes, might take me 5 years, might take me a lifetime before I find out why this is happening. But there's a certain amount of trust, though, that God, as a personal God, would not deal this deck of cards to me if it wasn't for the fact that, as a loving God, that there was a good reason for this happening to me. And that therefore this is part of my package, my Ishkacha Pratis, my divine providence that I need to live through, that my soul needs to experience, that I have to, for some reason, be part of at this moment, at this time, in order to fulfill the whole of the purpose of the cosmos. Like the Baal Shem Tov, who was the founder of the Hasidic movement, said such a powerful statement, which is right up your alley as far as the book is concerned. And I remember when I first heard it, how much of an impression it made on me. He said that every leaf, when it falls from a tree...
That's the introduction of our book.
Oh, really?
Absolutely.
Oh, okay. So we're on the same page.
Right.
So every leaf, when it falls from a tree, the timing of the fall, the path that it takes, the place that it descends upon, has a purpose. And not just any purpose, but a purpose that's necessary for the fulfillment of the creation of the whole of the universe. Now that is an absolutely incredible statement to make.
Right. I'm not sure if it's in the same pasuk, or the same sentence, or it goes on. But it also, this is the part we quote, is that from the Baal Shem Tov, is that a person will look at a leaf falling down from a tree and say, oh, there's a leaf falling down from a tree. Very nice, no big deal, make nothing of it. Ah, but if we look closer, we'll see that on the floor, on the ground, a caterpillar
Exactly.
is moving along, and the caterpillar is crying up to God and saying, God, it is so hot. I'm scorched with heat. Please have pity on me. Send down some shade. And God, in his infinite wisdom, listens to even the caterpillar crawling on the ground. And he sends down some shade, and that's when we see the leaf falling to the ground. We think we know reality. There are so many levels to reality, so many layers to reality. We don't begin to understand reality.
Exactly. And really, this helps us to open up our minds in so many ways. And like you say, and I think that was beautifully said, how this whole experience has humbled you to a great degree, because when you see the hand of God in so many different things, it doesn't have to be coincidences. It can be just an appreciation of science, of biology, of computers, of knowledge, of seeing a sunrise or a flower bloom or the smell of senses or whatever it might be, and realize this is the gift of life. Like you said, I'm awake. And as a result, it just puts a whole different perspective on life and makes us feel so much closer to God and to that spiritual dimension. And it's a very liberating force, because otherwise, how do people see things? As totally as accidents, as coincidences, as having no meaning whatsoever. And where's the purpose?
And you lose out on such an opportunity. Letters are sent to you. If you get a personal letter in the mail, do you throw it out in the wastebasket? Of course not. You open up the letter and you read it. These coincidences that happen in our life are personal letters sent to us from up above. Every single one of them bears a message.
Okay, so let me ask you a question. Let's say our viewership now, they're going to say, all right, I hear what you're saying. I read her book, or maybe I didn't read her book, but what she said sounds interesting. Now, next time I have a coincidence, what should I do? You're saying it's a message. Am I supposed to make up some type of message? How do I interpret the coincidence? What do I do with it when it happens? Next coincidence I have, we're going to put out a challenge to everybody out in our audience. Process that coincidence in the following way. Are you ready? I'm putting you on the spot. Now,
that is definitely putting me on the spot.
I know you don't have any pat answers. There's no such thing
we don't.
as
Exactly.
a pat answer.
No, there isn't.
But give us a little bit of insight from your experience, how you would help a person to experience a coincidence.
I'll tell you the answer with a story.
Okay.
Okay. So this is one of the stories from the, So this woman told me the story. It's actually a friend of my mother's. She told me this story that happened to her about 30 years ago. She said that she was playing with her little children on a Sunday morning, taking care of them, on a Sunday morning, and finally her husband came home around 12 o'clock and she had had it. It was a hot day. She said to her husband, Harry, I want to go out for a walk. I just want to get out. He said, get out? I just came home from work. I want to stay home and just take pleasure in the kids. She said, no, I want to go out. And she insisted, and finally the two of them went out for a ride. Right. And they went driving maybe 5-10 minutes when she looked at her husband and said, Harry, get home now. He said, what? Did I hear you? You just begged me to get out and now you want to go back home? She said, I'm telling you, turn the car around, go home now. There was something about the way she said it that made him realize there was something about her tone that he better just make that U-turn and go home. So sure enough, they made the U-turn. She got home. She ran up the steps, opened up the door as quickly as possible. And what she saw inside, she said, she never forgot the sight. She's with it 30 years later. It is like it was yesterday. She had just purchased a couch. The couch came encased in a big plastic bag. All three of her children were trapped in this plastic bag.
Are you kidding?
And the babysitter, who's supposed to be watching them, was in the back room, sound asleep. She didn't hear the cries of these three children. If this woman didn't listen to her inner voice, she would have lost all three of her children on that hot summer day. And she said, as of that moment, whenever she has some kind of feeling, a stirring inside her from that inner voice, she just knows it's not just an inner voice that's coming from her mind. There's some connection.
So you would suggest...
So what I'm saying as a psychotherapist, I have two hats that I wear, a psychotherapist and also an author. And when I put the two together, this is my message. When we hear that inner voice, that still inner voice inside us, the most wonderful thing we can do for ourselves is to listen. Because that still inner voice is really our connection to up above, to God. And the more we listen to it, the more we can understand it, and the louder it gets, the more we open our eyes and our ears and our hearts to that voice. So yes, there's no pat answer. I guess in a nutshell, it's to listen in, to listen into our souls.
I would add on to that perhaps, which I think is beautiful.
And to pray.
Right, to pray for an answer.
To pray for answers, and to pray for the willingness to listen to the answers.
Right.
And to surround ourselves and immerse ourselves with things that waken up the spirit, whether it's prayer, meditation, journaling, reading books, reading holy books, opening ourselves up.
All right. I appreciate that very much. And I just want to know if the person does have a coincidence happening to them, just that he should stop, and if they haven't heard the inner voice yet, stop and try to give themselves a little time to listen to it, and hopefully pray that it should give you a little bit of an indication of where it's really coming from. And don't think too much. Listen to the first voice that comes out, because if you listen too much, sometimes other voices start to go in and you get overshadowed. But I want to thank you very much for your time. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
And we hope to have you on the show again. I hope you continue to make many books and sell many books, and to spread the message about the beauty of life, the beauty of God's working in this world, and how we can appreciate life on that kind of level. So we're back to getting everybody ready out there. I hope you enjoyed listening to Mr. Leventhal. And if you haven't read the book already, seen it, we can get in touch with the book, or pick up the book at, I believe, all the major bookstores, Barnes & Noble. And if you want to get in touch with Mrs. Leventhal, you can email her also. What is your email address?
JLS Miracle. That's Judith Leventhal Small Miracle. So it's JLS Miracle at AOL.com.
Okay, great. All right. So hopefully you'll get some email.
Thank you so much.
As a result of that. In the meantime, everybody stop and listen to that inner voice. And when you listen to that inner voice, do something good to make the world a better place. Do a mitzvah. Do something meaningful that helps you to open up your mind and your heart to what's going on in the world around you. So listen, take care of yourself, and we shall see you next week, hopefully, at the Jewish Spotlight. And then you'll be able to, hopefully by next week, come back to us and tell us a little bit about what your life has been, how your life has changed as a result of this. Shalom.
Moshiach,